Hey guys, welcome to the Rebirth Podcast. I want to thank you guys for watching and for listening. In this podcast, we talk to individuals that have had to reinvent, recreate, and reimagine in order to grow. But before you watch and listen, I want to remind you to subscribe, to like, to review, and to share this episode and this podcast with everyone that you know. Thank you so much and enjoy. So I am so excited to talk to my next guest. She is somebody that I saw on Dancing with the Stars, my little Dancing with the Stars fellow alum. And I remember just being so moved by her story. And I'm just like, God, this girl's awesome. I love her energy. And then, of course, I'm a big sports guy, so I'm always watching ESPN. And then guess who I see too? Victoria, thank you so much for jumping on the Rebirth Podcast.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. And I too watched you as well. So I am thrilled to be on your podcast. So thank you.
No, thank you. So, there's so much that I want to get into. Your story, there's so many layers to it. And I think that, I don't know about you, but for me, I always tell people that when I get asked to come and share my story and talk about my life and my experiences, I think a lot of people presume that I'm going to start at the age of 19 years old, which is the day that my life forever changed. And I don't know if it's the same for you, that if when people ask Victoria to come and share and speak, if they're like, hey, can you start at 11 years old when you were diagnosed, and then your life changed, but for me, I actually believe that there is importance of going back to the first 11 years of Victoria's life before this thing happened that we're going to get into. So talk to me about growing up. I know you're triplets, one of triplets. You have two brothers. Talk to me about what childhood was like before 11 years old.
Childhood was pretty normal. As normal as can be when you're a triplet. We always joke it was like buy one get two free in our households. But I'm one of four, so I have two. My two brothers, my two triplet brothers are boys, and then I have an older brother. And so there's three boys and me in the family. And so growing up, I was very much just on the go with them. Like I would just keep up with the boys. And we, like, our family, like there was no health issues. Like I think I went to the doctor once a year for my um my like annual checkup you get done before school.
Yeah.
Like yeah, so it was just like it was nothing ever happened. And then right, like when I turned 11, I started getting sick like every 2 weeks or so. Like I got asthma, then I had so I would get like pneumonia, then I got, these fainting spells, but I would always bounce back, or these constant ear infections. And so we couldn't, like there was no indication that something was seriously wrong. I just went from, the first 10 years of my life never getting sick to every 2 weeks kind of something was wrong, like something. So I always got sick. I always just seemed to get sick at that point. And then it probably changed when I was about 11 and a half. And then I got really, really sick. But life prior to all of that was very normal. Like it was just a good life.
Yeah. I always wonder, I love, when you see like you meet a guy that has nothing but sisters, and then you meet a girl that has nothing but brothers. I love that dynamic, right? To kind of see like, what did they pick up? How were they influenced by having nothing but brothers, or having nothing but sisters in a different case. But in your case, having nothing but brothers, what was that like? You're talking about keeping up with them, and boys are a different breed, right? We are a different breed, and we
Yeah.
are always into something. What was Victoria like, being the little sister hanging out with the brothers?
I was trying to be like the boys. If they were climbing trees, I was climbing trees. If we were playing street hockey, I was playing street hockey. And I think it really played a huge role in sports for me as well, because I feel like I always just wanted to keep up and do what they were doing. And so for me, it was the best of both worlds, because I was able to kind of have three best friends and just kind of follow them around. But I never thought anything of it until I got older. and started having like guy friends, or I would see my, my friends try to talk to guys and I'm just chill nonchalant about it. But I was like, I have brothers, so I grew up around all the boys and then there was me. So I feel like for me it made me in a sense just kind of not be afraid to fall and not be afraid to try to keep up, and if you don't get there, keep trying. And so for because my brothers, it was never a, oh, I can't do it, or I can't. They're like, nope, you're gonna do it. Like, you're gonna figure it out. And even
Yeah.
when I was coming out of that 4-year vegetative state, that was a huge thing they did as well. As it was very much like, all right, Victoria, we're getting you out. We're gonna do stuff. We're gonna, let's work out. Let's hold your head up and try to talk. And so for my brothers, I think from very little on, I never skipped a beat, and they never let me fall behind. It was
Wow.
very much like there was never a thing, "Oh, you're a girl, you can't do it." They're like, "Yeah, you can do it. You can probably do it better than us, so
Yeah.
do it."
That's
And then
awesome.
that was kind of yeah, so I hit the lottery with my brothers for sure.
And so you mentioned at 11 and a half, life changing, which at this point, and I'm gonna go for this. I'm gonna go for this. I'm gonna
Alright.
try it, Victoria. I think you know what I'm talking about. I'm gonna try. But at 11 and a half, you were diagnosed with transverse myelitis and acute disseminated
Mhm.
encephalitis. Is that how you? Is that
You nailed it.
is that it?
You nailed Yeah,
I stayed up all night,
you were
literally,
the
just like
first
reciting.
you were the first person that has nailed it.
Well, all right.
Wow, I don't even say it right, so
So
well
talk to me. Thank you. Talk.
yeah.
It's kind of important for me to get that right because it's almost like names, right? Like for me, it's important to get people's names right. Like names are so important, and I believe that this is so much a part of your identity. It's important to get it right. But I've never heard of this. I've never heard of this until I saw you on Dancing with the Stars in 2017, and you start to unpack your story and the packages that they do throughout the show. And you're like, what is this? And oh my God, how
Yeah.
this affected you. I mean, I mean, to say you're a miracle, to not only be alive, but to have done all the incredible things that you've done, which we're going to get into that bio and unpack all that stuff for the listener right now that has never heard of you. But I mean, it's incredible. So talk to me about 11 and a half. And I'm sure at 11 and a half, you're like, wait, I don't know how to pronounce this. I don't know what this is. I mean, talk to me about this process of what this diagnosis is.
So the diagnosis, there are two rare autoimmune conditions that attack your brain and your spinal cord, but you don't actually normally get both. So the transverse myelitis attacks your spinal cord, and the acute disseminated encephalomyelitis attacks your brain. And
Wow.
so they didn't know what these conditions really were for many many years after 2006. So for in 2006 they had no idea what was wrong. Like, they at first were like, oh, she's doing it for attention, she's dragging her foot for attention. And then I end up paralyzed, and then I start going unresponsive, and then they can't figure it out. They literally can't figure out what's wrong. And then they do eventually figure out what's wrong, and then they're like, she's a lost cause. Like, people don't bounce back from these conditions. And I'm all about looking for blessings in disguise, because we realized later on that had doctors known more about these rare conditions and had more knowledge to be more acute in the treatment process, it all could have been avoided by a round of steroids.
For real?
And yeah, and I found that out many, many years later. And
Wow.
so, but they didn't the knowledge that they do now, and they didn't even have a lot of knowledge till 2010, and this is 2006. So by the
Wow.
time they're putting it all together, they're pretty much like, yeah, she's not coming out of this. Like, she's not going to survive, and if she does survive, the Victoria you once knew is never coming back. And the blessing in disguise about these two conditions is that had I gotten one or the other versus both, I would have either ended up a quadriplegic on a ventilator or brain dead.
Really?
So it almost Yeah, so it was almost like because it went untreated and because they didn't know how to handle it, so you're getting swelling in your brain and it's traveling up your spine, but because it was 2, they kind of almost evenly did their damage, but did it in
Wow.
a less, I mean, it was severe, but it wasn't as severe as it could be, and that was something I had to remind myself when I was processing that because I was like, "Okay, yes, this happened, it could have been avoided, but it could have been way worse." And
So this is a mentality
I wasn't.
so this is a mentality you incorporated about 4, 5, 6, 7 years later that you started to or was this
Yeah.
perspective you're talking about something that you started to see earlier on?
I think afterwards, I think at the time, so doctors are writing me off as a lost cause, but I'm aware the whole time, so I'm locked in. So for me, that is when I just went into, "Holy crap, what's going on?" Like, survival mode, but that's when I really honestly discovered what faith was because no one else could hear me, and so I started praying, and I remember being just, like, trying to make a list of all the things I was going to do when I came out of this versus writing my obituary, which I kind of had to do because, the writing was on the walls, but I would only spend a small time in that really, low vibrational space and was like, I need to be focusing on my gratitude and what I'm grateful for. And at 11, 12, 13, 14 years old, even 50, you're not thinking of that, but for me that was my lifeline because I was like, okay, I can think. That in of itself is a really good sign, and so I just kept saying I'm one day closer, I'm one day closer, and
Right.
just really praying that I would come out of this, but also that, like, no one would give up on me. But I come from a family who doesn't give up at
Right.
all ever, and so they just kept believing and they believed in a miracle and they were proactive and they refused to accept the prognosis. They accepted the diagnosis, but not the prognosis. And I believe that their refusal to do so is what eventually helped me, slowly come back to life.
So when you use the term locked in, which I know was the title of your book, I also know that it was a title of 30 for 30 that ESPN did on you. And talk to me about because I'm curious when I was in a medical induced coma for 3 weeks, right? It's nothing compared to what you endured as far as 4 years of being in this state. But for the 3.5 weeks that I found myself in the medical induced coma, my eyes weren't open, but there were moments where I could hear things. There were moments where
Yeah.
I can hear conversations taking place around me. I knew that there was activity taking place in my hospital room, but of course, I couldn't give anything back to people even through my eyesight or almost as if when you have a baby, right, and a baby can't communicate at the early age, but they can follow you with their eyes. I couldn't do any of that. I mean,
Yeah.
and it's that weird feeling of you want to communicate, you want to do something, but you can't. I mean, what was that like for you being in that state at such a young age where, I mean, listen, you're still figuring out life. I mean, you're still learning about life. Then all of a sudden you're having to learn about two brand new things and being somebody who probably was bubbly and has this big personality to now all of a sudden be confined to this body that can't communicate, but yet you see a world happening around you. Do you remember a
Yeah.
lot of that time, that period?
I do, and it's funny, because I feel like what I should have felt then, I felt later on. Is that, anxiousness, that depression, that trauma, the PTSD, I felt later
Uh,
on in life. I felt when I was at, like, when I was in my, the moments where everyone's like, "Whoa, like, you're doing all of this," because when I was there, I talk about this where you can be at the top of the mountain and rock bottom at the same time. On the outside, you're at the top of the mountain, but on the inside, you're at rock bottom, and so for me, when I was at my rock bottom visually, I was in such a state of peace, and that could only be from God and could only be from just having that faith that my story
wow.
doesn't end in defeat. And so it was the situation of that this, like, surrender, but I think I had, being so young, I had that on my side, the age on my side of like, okay, Victoria, like, you are in this state, but you're okay, you're alive, your family loves you, they're taking care of you. So it was like one of those things where I feel like I was shielded from that because I just had to survive. I was just trying to get through each day. I was trying to stay alive. Like I didn't have time to think of any of those other things. And so I
Yeah.
feel like I was protected in that sense, but I did watch the world go on around me. So when I did come back, I went into this like crazy catch up mode. And I went into this, I almost channeled a
Ah,
lot of that PTSD and everything I was feeling and suppressed it and got busy and had to achieve all these things, had to go do all these things, had to prove people wrong, had to prove that I was a functioning member of
mm,
society. And so I never really processed anything. And so it just kind of was slowly coming along. And so but in that time, it's funny, I look back and I'm like, I was at such peace. How do I get that? Like, how was
right,
I able to have that and that faith that everything was going to work out? By no means on any paper by any expert was this going to work in my favor. Like, was I going to come out of this, let alone
right.
survive? And yet I believed and made this bucket list that I was going to do all these different things. I didn't know how they were going to happen. I didn't know when they were going to happen, but I just had this faith that, I wouldn't still be here if I didn't have something to give, or if I didn't have, if by the grace of
Absolutely.
God I get this second chance, then I'm going to make the most of it.
It's, I mean, that's incredible. I mean, I think about, you have to have a goal, right? You have to have something to look forward to. So that was the thing that in many ways helped keep you alive, is this thought process of, I'm going to do all these things. I'm creating that bucket list, as you just said. But then, another thing that I always try to remind people when they think of my story, and I'm just speaking specifically for me, and hopefully that gives people a different perspective when they encounter other individuals that have experienced trauma like both you and I have, is that it's easy because, and I think I'm in a different category as you, because I have, my scars are so visible, right? They're on my face, they're on my body. I can't hide them. And even in this era of wearing a mask, I can tell you that I get on a plane, I'm at the airport, and I'm the guy that travels with a ball cap, with sunglasses
Yeah.
and a mask. And I'm like, no one's gonna notice me. And yet
Yeah.
people are like, hey, JR, hey, we know that's you. You're not hiding from anybody. And I'm like, dude,
I
how?
know.
Like, like how does that happen?
Yeah.
But I'm thinking to myself, it's easy when you look at me and you start to hear about my story, it's easy to get caught up in thinking of the physical recovery. And I
Yeah.
think when people start to hear about your story, because at first glance, they're like, here's this beautiful girl. What's her deal? Right. I'm
You're
sure
so
there's
lucky.
people yeah, you're so lucky. I'm sure people see you on ESPN and they constantly throw you into a category. Here's a beautiful girl that just got an opportunity. They don't have any idea as to
Yeah.
what the story is. Right. But when they start to hear the story and they start to learn about the challenge, I think people immediately just go to, "Oh my god, physically, what was that like?" But you touched on something that I think is so important, because now your story, along with mine and so many other
Yeah.
like ours, crosses over now into this mental health conversation that I think a lot more people are open and to having, because you mentioned having PTSD, having anxiety, having depression, having all of these things where you felt like you had to go at 100 miles an hour. And it's so fascinating. I tell people that when I was in the Humvee and I literally was burning alive, which is crazy to say, I was at peace. There were moments where I was at peace. I was like, literally, I'm going to die, and I was at peace. I felt okay. I felt no pain. And you talked about being in
Yeah.
that state for those 4 years. 4 years you were in a quote unquote vegetative state, and you were at peace. But yet, unfortunately,
Yeah.
you now start to like, talk to me about that, because I think that's so trippy. Like, how we're going through trauma and we're at peace, but yet we get an opportunity to be a part of society, and then everything starts to come.
It all comes, yeah. Yeah. And it's so interesting because I feel like that's a piece that people want to hear but don't know how to ask for it, because they
Right.
look at the physicality of what we've been through and that, and then they think, "Oh, well, you must never have a bad day. You must never have," and you're like, "Sorry, what?"
Yeah.
Like, Okay. And that's the thing is, like, with, with my, with that,
Like
like, there was
suddenly you're
times where
Wonder
I
Woman.
was yeah, like, you're just this, like, "Oh," even, like, I remember I was having a good day, and I had to give myself a pep talk in the car, and I was, like, filming these back-to-back shows, and I was in it, like, it was cloudy, and I couldn't get the clouds, and I go in, and sure you could win an Oscar for the face you put on, and you
Yep.
go in, and
Yep.
this, I love this person to death, and they're like, "You never have a bad day, you were just always so bubbly and cheery," and I'm like, who are they looking at today? Because I am just trying to hold myself together until I go have, a little crying session in my car. And
Yeah.
and it's just interesting because people don't think of that and like people are also just as shocked as I'm sure they are hearing that from you of when you're in that moment where you're dying and you're at the end and it is bad and it should be painful and it should be scary and you're at peace
Yeah.
and there is this peace in this trust that comes and that is
Yeah.
just the grace of God really but it's crazy how no one thinks about the after effect it's like the hangover of the trauma if you
Yeah.
will of that
Yeah,
kind of like
yeah,
yeah
yeah, th I always talk, I talk about I'm a very big, like, analogy guy. I think that things make more sense to me and to people sometimes if you sort of put it in an analogy, something they can sort of visualize and see, and I talk about how we are a society that suffers from we have the piñata effect, and I don't know if that's the right way to frame it, but essentially, like, if you've ever seen a piñata, been at a party, or you just know what it is, like, I mean, you've seen it where as soon as it's busted open, you see kids rush in and kids are grabbing
yeah
everything they can. They don't even know what they're grabbing. And then they turn around with their arms like this and they run away. And they realize when they get to wherever their safe space, right? They realize that, oh, I don't even like half of the stuff that I picked up. But because we are a
yeah
society that is conditioned to go and to have and to grab everything that you can, right?
yeah
And I think that's what you and I are touching on right now is how when we were going through what we were going through, the trauma, it's sort of we could not overwhelm ourselves with a year from now, 2
yeah
years from now, 5 years from now, hell, even a week from now. We had to think about presently in the moment and just focus on today. And I think that that is something that a lot of people probably overlook when they hear our stories and they see what we've gone through and how we've
yeah
survived it. Is that yes, it's important to have a long term goal and to think about what I want to be when I grow up. However, it's like don't lose sight of this moment and this day and what it's teaching you and what it's providing you because this is very much this moment is equipping you with everything that you need to get where you ultimately want to go. And so it's to people listening right now, I think Victoria and I are both in agreement of saying, hey, listen, we understand life is busy and we understand that there's a pressure to be the next thing, but slow down a little bit and don't forget today. Don't forget this moment.
But I
So,
think we're living in a world right now where people are trying to speed back up again, and you're like, "We
mhm,
can't speed up yet, we're not there yet." And
yeah,
that's
yeah,
okay, and that fatigue and that burnout's kicking in with people, but it's like, it's not time yet, and that's okay, but you can't force it. You can't force the things, just be
hmm,
like, "It's gonna get there, but it's not there yet," but people are, like, holding on so tightly that they're actually getting in their own way.
hmm. So you're in this
Mhm.
state for 4 years. Um, and then I don't want to say all of a sudden, but you start to see some gradual improvement. You start to see regain mobility because you lost the ability to do everything. I mean, walk, feed your. I mean, you lost everything, right? And so for 4 years, here you
Yeah.
now are starting to be able to blink and regain a little. Talk to me about what that process was like, not only for you, but then I think maybe to witness your parents and your brothers and everybody that was visiting you to see their reaction to now Victoria in a very different place than she has been the last 4 years.
It was incredible. It was one of those things where it happened and then it just kept happening. This miracle of blinking that so many people, would take for granted became my lifeline. And then it became this continuation of recovery and more, and for my family, I mean, they always were holding out hope for a miracle. They never wanted to believe or accept that I wasn't there and that
Mm.
I was gone, and so I think for them, they were so excited, and it was whatever state I was in, even if I was, because when I came out of it, I was so weak and nothing had worked for a very long time, but I was mentally like, "Let's go. Like, I wanna do this," and I couldn't talk right away, and but my family found ways to help me get what I needed to say across, work on my upper body strength, work, because I would go to, occupational speech and physical therapy, but then when I came home, they would help me with all, because I was just like, I just want to get caught up. And once again, my brothers never just saying, okay, well, Victoria, we're gonna take it easy on her. They're like, all right, she's back, let's go. Like, let's get her going, like, let's figure out, let's help her move her chair, and so I think for my family, they were just so excited that I had survived, that even if my mom said, she goes, "Even if you never spoke again, even if we had to take care of you the rest of your life," she's like, "We would have done it." She goes, "We just
Mm.
you don't give up on your family, you don't give up on your child," and my whole family was just so, every little piece of progress was a miracle in of itself. And that
Mm.
was really cool because we got to celebrate every little thing.
That's and then, I mean, not to sort of gloss over the journey, right? But I mean, to fast forward pretty quickly. I mean, are we and forgive me, like what's the time frame? Because I think I read where it was like either 2.5, maybe 3 years, 2 to 3 years, where you all of a sudden now are in the Paralympics. I mean, what was the time? I mean,
It was 2 years.
this is crazy. 2 years, two.
Yes, it's about, 2 years from the time my brothers threw me back in the pool. So I was so probably about 2.5 by the time I from the blink moment on, yeah.
This is insane, ladies and gentlemen. Think about this. Like and if you need to go back to understand the timeline, the listener right now, like go back probably, 5 minutes or so and then start. And to think that here she was now, a couple of 2.5 years later in 2012, was in the Summer Paralympics as a swimmer. Like talk to me like were you a swimmer before? Like where did where did
Yes.
this come from, man?
When I was 5 years old, I told my mom I was going to win a gold medal, at the Olympics. So I love swimming. I've been a little fish since I was little.
No.
And so that was always my happy place. And it was always my place where I found the most peace as a little girl. I was just a little fish. And when I got sick, obviously I wasn't in the water. And when I came out of it, my brothers were like, "Do you want to go swimming again?" And I was like, "No, I can't swim." I said, I can't even hold my head up. Like, I can't swim. And so, brothers, they decided that they wanted to get me over that fear, and so they strapped on a life jacket, and they took my arms, they took my legs, and they chucked me in the pool. And I couldn't
Wow.
kick. I could scream at this point, but I couldn't go in kicking and screaming, so I was just, like, screaming bloody murder. I was like, "Ah!" Like, "What have you done?" And they just stayed with me in the pool. They helped me kind of find my balance, and I realized that I didn't need my legs in the pool. And so it became a very another peaceful place for me, because I think before I didn't I didn't want it to be a reminder of what I had lost. I didn't want it to
Mm,
be another thing that had changed or taken away, but when it comes to stuff like that, usually when those things come, A, they're irrational because they never went anywhere. It's like we're
mm.
grieving something that never was taken away, just temporarily is on pause, but we're so afraid, and we get ourselves in this mindset of like, well, it's not what it is right where I want it to be, therefore it's never going to be that way again, and therefore, and we just spiral, and then next thing you know, we're holding a funeral for this
Yeah.
situation, and you're like, hold the phone here, but you have
Yeah.
to just kind of jump in. And so my brothers just threw me in, and it was one of those things that by doing that, it got me out of that cycle of thinking it'll never be this, it'll never be that. Well, no, but it actually usually is better. When you go
Mhm.
through it, when you go through that thing that makes you uncomfortable, that you think is going to be uncomfortable, it actually is going to in twofold be better than what you could have expected. And so
Oh,
2
so
years
good.
later from being thrown into the pool, it was definitely better than than what could have been expected. And so, but it was a lesson in that of how many times do we do that with circumstances, people, whatever, where we paint this picture, and just because it's not going the way we want it to right now, or it's changed temporarily or whatever, we think that we have to hold this like funeral for it, for the
Yeah.
situation, for when it's like, no, this is just a nothing's permanent. Things can change
Yeah.
like that. But you have to go through it and realize, wait a second, this is actually not that. This
I
is
love that.
irrational thinking.
I love that because I that's what I've been telling everybody through the whole period of, COVID, and I've told people, I was like, listen, I get it. This is change. This is unfortunate. People are affected greatly by this. However, I think that this is, whether you want to say God, whether you say life, whatever people believe in, but I believe that this is the universe saying, hey, stop.
Yes.
No more distractions, and now we're gonna get the thing that we always talk about we never have enough of, which is time. And now you're gonna be forced to sit with yourself. Like I always
Mhm.
talk about intimacy, like you have to learn how to be intimate, and immediately I think people's minds go to with somebody else. And it's
Yeah.
like, no, intimacy first has to start with yourself. How can you be intimate with yourself? How can you listen to yourself? How can you, nurture your own feelings, your own emotions? How can you listen to yourself, right? How can you talk to yourself? Then that intimacy, then as you start to do that internal work as an individual, then you can now show up for other people. And you're so right, and I love that you touched on that. So during this time that you're in the pool screaming at the bloody murder at the top of your lungs, like, but you couldn't walk though, right? Like,
No. No, no, no.
which
I
is why
would
you said you realized you didn't need your legs to to
yeah.
to, to be in the water.
I only started walking about 5 years ago. 5 5 years. Yeah, 5 years ago. So, so
God.
it's been I was in it. I mean, I was told I would never walk again. So I got, I pimped out a wheelchair and just got on with it. And with swimming, I didn't really need my legs, as surprising as, I mean, obviously there's certain strokes where you're like, I need my legs, but for the most part, I found just like, and for me, it was never about that. I just found peace in the water, and then got into one competition and another, and it was just a place for me that I could be free of anything holding me back. I could put my head in the water and just be like everyone else, and that was a sense of normalcy and freedom that I'd not had since before I got sick.
And just so everyone understands, when I talk about how in 2012 she was in the Paralympics in London, s- in the summer trials, like let me explain to you. She didn't just participate, which I'm not knocking anybody that goes and just participates. I'm just saying I want you to understand what Victoria ended up doing. She won a gold medal, which she said when she was a kid she was going to do, and she won three
Mm,
silver medals. Like that is
3
crazy. And
silver.
then when we're sitting there talking about you learning how to walk again 5 years after the fact, let's break this down again for people to really understand, because I know people are busy right now and they're probably listening to this as they're walking, driving, doing something in the house. But I want you to like listen for a second. And I don't mean like just like here. No, I want you to like listen. Victoria started walking in 2016, 5 years ago from 2021, right? 2017, a year later, she was on Dancing with the Stars. And listen, I'm not, again, not trying to say anything negative about anybody, but she wasn't she was dancing literally on her.
Attempting to dance.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Like, what? What? Dude, talk to me about that moment when they reach out to you and they're like, "Hey, you wanna be on season 25 of Dancing with the Stars?" What goes through your mind? Are you like, "Can I do this? Am I ready for this?" Or are you like, "Psh, look what I've already done. No big deal. Let's go."
Yeah. So I've been a fan of the show since it started, and I had told my mom when I was 10 that I was gonna be on that show when it first
Oh my
premiered, and
god. You just keep
then
speaking
in
things into
2010,
existence.
I need to, like, learn. I sometimes do. I a lot of times do, actually, and don't even like, I've learned more recently the, like, power of, like, manifestation and mindset, and I'm like, man, I was doing it all wrong and it seemed to work out, like, but now I'm like, "Ooh, what if I do it, like, right? What will happen then?" And so but with that, when I was, coming out of my vegetative state, I was trying to sit up again, and I was working on holding my head up, and we used to watch Dancing with the Stars, and I would sign to my mom that I was gonna be on that show. But my mom was like, "But we gotta hold our head up first, like, we have to be able to sit up and hold our head up first before you go on Dancing with the Stars." So when I got that call, it was one of those things where we had had some conversations, and earlier in the year, but there was, like, scheduling and stuff, so nothing was ever in
Mhm.
concrete, and then I went for a meeting, and, like, 3 days later, I was at the X Games in Minneapolis, Summer X Games. I was about to go and do a live hit, and I get this call, and it was, "How would you like to be on season 25 of Dancing with the Stars?" And I even have goosebumps, like, I'm sitting there and I'm like, but they're like, "We
What?
can't tell." I was like, "Can I tell my mom? Like, can I tell my mom and dad?" Like, or so like, and they're like, "Yeah, yeah, of course." And so I sit there and I was like, I was in this state of shock because it was such a full circle thing that I
Mhm.
immediately said yes. Immediately said yes. I just said yes. And then afterwards came was like so I went and then I did my live hit, and then I walked and we were in the Minnesota Vikings stadium, and I walked in one of the hall in, like, the down hallways. I was all by myself, and I just sat down, and I started crying. And it was like a "What the heck?" cry, but also, like, a full circle
Mhm.
cry of, like, "Whoa, like, this is eno" and then as we got closer to it, I was kinda like, "Oh, crap. How am I going to do this?" Because I still have no feeling in my legs, and so then I go and we have our first day, and I literally, like, secretly moved to LA. I can't tell anyone. I'm 22 years old. No one came with me because my parents, like, looking back, we all laughed because my mom's like, "We absolutely should have gone with you." Like,
Yeah.
I went out there and I had no idea what I was doing. I hadn't spent a lot of time in LA, and I was just like, I'm given a rental car, I'd be told where to go the next day, go in for a fitting, and I'm just like, I have no idea what's going on. And I'm just sitting there, I'm like, "What have I done? Like,
And the
what
thing
am I doing
about
here?"
and this speaks to the same experience I had when it's like it's such a well-oiled machine that when you
Yes.
agree to being on the show, like, just hang on. Like, you literally have to hang on because
Yeah,
like you just said, you land like, I lived in LA at the time, so that was helpful to me, but it was immediately it's
yeah,
like you said, you go to fitting, you go meet your partner, you go to dress rehearsal, you like, you start you do interviews, you're doing package you're
right,
doing all this stuff, right? And it's just like, it
yeah.
goes like this. So, let me ask you a question. So, I always tell people that for me, Dancing with the Stars, I loved it. Like it was a great experience, but it was one of those experiences where because it's so busy and so fast, that at least for me, I felt like I didn't get a chance to really enjoy it when I was going through it and in the moment. I feel like I didn't really get to appreciate it once it was over because then it was kind of like that, oh, okay, I don't have to go do like another
Well, like the
interview. I don't have to go to
flashback
rehearse.
memories.
Yes. Yes. It's like
Yeah.
exactly. So, what was the experience like for you?
Super weird.
Obviously, Val was your partner. Val super like he's sharp dude can dance. I mean, he's smooth. What was it like meeting Val and I mean and then just the show? Like what was the experience like for you?
It was incredible. It was, I had wanted to be paired with Val, so that was a really cool surprise, and it was cool. I mean, he was such a good teacher and pushed me to the point where I needed to be pushed, but also was there kind of to help me kind of navigate because it blew up. Like, when we did my first dance, none of us were like, even talking to the producers afterwards, they're like, "None of us were expecting this." Like, we were expecting something, but not this. And I remember the first the first show being out there and standing there, and they show the package, and I'm like, I have this flashback. And mind you, I haven't dealt with PTSD yet. I haven't dealt with any of that. I've just been flying by the seat of my pants. And I immediately am like frozen. And I'm standing there and I'm
Oh,
just frozen and frozen and
no.
frozen. And I I hear I hear, like, the package is starting to close, and then
Dancing,
I hear
whatever,
a
whatever,
voice.
whatever, Victoria
Correct.
Arlen
So
and
I
her
hear
partner, Val
yeah, Victoria
Chirikowski.
Arlen, Val Schmuckowski, and but before that, I hear Val going, "Arlen, Arlen," and I look, and yeah, and he's coming to me as we're starting our dance, and he goes, "Let's go change the world." And we just did this dance.
Oh,
And it was, like, such a moment, and then everything after that was just like, "Whoa." Like, just this, like, crazy kind of roller coaster, but, it was wild. It was just a wild ride, but it really showed me what I was capable of post paralysis, but also so many people what we realized were like, it's a great show, but what's even greater about the show is the impact it can have and the
for
stories and
sure.
the people sharing their hearts and going on this vulnerable journey. And so I had no idea the impact it would have and how much it would change my life. And it was just a really remarkable, remarkable experience. But there is that like crash afterwards where you're
Yeah.
kind of just like
Yeah.
what just happened and where
Yeah.
and you're like, what is going on? Like, and so it was crazy. It was such a roller coaster, but one that was beyond what I could have imagined.
And that's what I tell people. I try to remind people that yes, of course, a lot of times when people think of that show, they think of people going on and losing weight and getting in shape, right? Like
Yeah,
that's kind of the reputation it had for a very long time. And I tell people it's like, yes, physically, again, back to this what we said at the top, physically, it's easy to focus on the physical aspect of it. But what I learned is that
yes.
mentally and emotionally, it's a lot as well. And so when you're crashing, you're not just
Yeah,
crashing physically, like, oh, finally, I don't have to like be on my feet. And for you, wear heels, 10 hours a day, every single day, rehearsing, whatever, however long you did. It's also like mentally, like, oh, I don't have to give out my voting number anymore. Like I don't have to like tell people to vote,
yeah,
vote, vote emotionally. And that I'm telling you, man, those packages are dangerous. You can't watch the packages. I
I know.
remember I learned that week four. Week four was what do they call it? It was whatever the year, most challenging year or
Was
whatever
yeah,
most memorable year. And so of
yeah,
course they did my injury and I'm standing there and the packages is playing and I'm watching it
yep,
and literally I start to and I'm just like because it's the same thing in many ways. It was I had forgotten the journey that I had been on up until that point and the package
yeah,
reminded me. I saw my mom like talking and interviewed and she's crying and I'm like, "Oh my god," like and that's
yeah,
dangerous and it takes so much it takes an incredible partner to keep you locked in and keep you focused, but also you as the dancer. I mean, it takes a lot of strength and skill to be able to keep yourself out of that space and focus on we're here to, as Val said to you, change the world. So my question is, so you did all these different styles of dances. What was your
yep.
most challenging style of dance and what was your most favorite style of dance?
Ooh, well, I think the hard
Mm.
one, the foxtrot we did, I started in my wheelchair, and that was more emotionally hard because that was my most memorable year, and I hadn't sat back in my wheelchair
Ah.
since I'd walked, and Val wanted it shipped out. So it was, like, such a weird but I think, honestly, the hardest one for me, like, just in general, because I feel like I'm a little bit of an awkward turtle, was the rumba. We got that, like, week 2, and I was just not like, no. It was like, you watch it, I watch it, and I cringe, like, I am like, "No, honey," because we had just done this, like, fierce Taylor Swift-like one, and then we did that it was a w day week 2, we had 2 dances, and, like, we did this, like, Taylor Swift tango, and then the next day, it was my birthday, we're doing this rumba, and we're like the premise of the dance was, like, us we're ending our marriage, basically, and I'm like, "I'm 22, like, what is going on?" Like, and I'm having to sit, and then I'm in this nightie, and I was like, "Dude, I don't know what I'm doing." And he's like, "We have to be connected." I was like, "I just met you, like, I can't like, I don't know."
I don't
I
know
was just
what
like, "I don't know
marriage
what's
is
going
like.
on."
I
I
was
was like,
around
"I'm not
boys
there."
growing up, like, like doing rumba, like
I
I
was like,
no, that's yeah, that
"Sensual, like,
was
what are you talking about? Like, we're breaking up, but it's a sensual breakup." And I was like, "Nah, it's usually like deuces, like, let's go. And so, that was, like, kind of weird, but I loved contemporary, but I loved the Argentine tango.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
that was just but I had, like, broken ribs when I was doing that, so that was, like, a rough
Wait,
go. I think
what?
I honestly I liked yeah, I had a couple ribs that were just, like, not happy,
What?
but, because I hadn't
How?
we did a lot of, like no idea, but also, like, I sat in a wheelchair for 10 years, so no one's ever walked after that, so we didn't know what my body was gonna do, so I was just like, gotta love Gina, she was just, like, taping me up and keeping me, like, put
Yes.
together, and so I feel like I loved them all. I think the rumba was really hard, but I feel like each week I learned something different, and each week challenged me and challenged my legs, but towards the end, you kinda start to get a little confident too, and I feel like
Mhm.
in the beginning, I just was like, "Don't fall, don't fall, don't fall, don't fall," and then towards the end, I was like, "Okay, I can figure out the Charleston. I can figure out, the Argentine tango." And so I think the one that really like the quick step was just my feet don't work move quickly. So
Yeah.
I was just like, "Oh, don't die." Like,
Well, let me tell you
"Mayday."
something.
They're like,
The
"You
foxtrot
can't
the
do this
foxtrot for
here."
just for anybody to
Ooh,
foxtrot, just so you understand, I mean, that's no joke. Foxtrot, like, is hard too. Now, let me ask you, did you do the quick step? Because I feel like quick step was so hard for me, and then especially, like, if you're just starting to kinda get into this space of your legs, like, I feel like the quick step would be hard too.
it was so hard, but we did it to
Yeah.
a song I really loved, so I feel like I was singing the whole time. Like, I was very, I was kinda just having myself a day, but I was also just, like, the whole time I was like, "I have no idea if my legs are moving, so we're just gonna Jesus take the wheel." Like, hopefully they're moving because they might not
Oh.
be. So, and then yeah, the quick step,
So,
I was like,
let
"Sorry,
me
what?"
ask you, after the show, do you still watch the show? That's the first question, and
I
then
do, yeah.
the follow-up to that
Oh,
is,
sorry.
do you ever no, you're good. Do you ever find yourself, and I don't know if you do this because I think you're sweeter than me, maybe, like, but I found myself after the show, I'd watch other contestants and I'm like, "Oh, look, he didn't point. Oh, look, he didn't look his frame. Look at his frame. His frame's not good." I suddenly, like, deemed myself to be this expert that I could be a judge, and I'm judging from the house, and I was like, "Yo, chill out, dude, like, a few months ago, you were on that, like, relax, like, you're not an expert, clearly,
Yeah,
because
like
now if you start playing some music right now in my house, like, I'm not gonna do tango, I'm not gonna do foxtrot, I'm not gonna do jive, I'm literally gonna do the Running Man. That's what I go back to. So who am I to sit here and judge anybody, right? But it just I found myself in that
yeah,
space that I felt like I'm an expert now.
I can do this. Yep. I don't feel with the dance part, but I feel like when I watch it, the scoring, I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Like, they should have gotten more." Like, I'm more
Yeah.
like team, like, good score or, like, trying to f yeah, so I'll watch it from, like, that, or especially if I'm, like, cheering on my friends, then I'm just like, "Come on!" But I'm also like, "Okay, Victoria, calm down. Like, this is out of your control." Like, so I feel like I can watch it more from that, and then going in person too is so much fun, just, like, the
Oh.
reminiscing back, but I always laugh, I'm like, I would be if I had done it now, if there was ever, like, a bring people back, like, I would be so down to do that because my legs are so much stronger and more coordinated that I was like, "I think I actually could dance maybe," when before I was just trying not to fall.
Yet I'm sort of chewing on a piece of ice, sorry. But yet, if I have the reverse, if they asked me to go back,
The
I would
reverse.
go back. I would 100%. I enjoyed it so much. However, I don't know if my legs would operate the same way that they did 10 years ago at this point. So
Yeah,
mine would be reversed. I think my legs are weaker now and I'm older and you know how that whole thing goes.
yeah.
So, listen, you've continued to do so much. I know you started your Victoria's Victory Foundation. And I'd love to learn more about what your foundation does, why you decided to set it up, and yeah, just talk about the work you're doing through that organization.
Yeah, absolutely. the Victoria's Victory Foundation actually came to since I was a little girl, I've wanted to help people and I've wanted to, change the world in my own little way. And I didn't understand the journey I would have to go on in order to do that. And so when we started Victoria's Victory Foundation, that was my gift to back to having the second chance because I struggle with survivor's guilt. I didn't
Mm,
understand why I got a miracle and so many people didn't. And so, but I also realized that so many people have just or don't have the basic things such as a wheelchair or adaptive equipment or nursing care hours. And so how many people were not as fortunate as me to even have a chance at independence. And so
right.
when I started my foundation, it was really just the focus. Let's help other people have a second chance. Other people have a victory. Other people who have had this catastrophic thing happen to them be able to feel not alone and feel like, I see you, I want to help you, I want to give you that support, I want to give you the wings to fly. And so that was really the message behind it. And then what we've been able to do for the last 4 years is incredible. We've given out scholarships all over the country and just changed lives. And that for me makes, having the second chance worth it. And why I you know why I heard this once in church where you weren't saved to sit, you were saved to serve.
Mm,
And I thought about that even beyond my faith of being saved. It was coming out of this impossible situation, and how can I serve, how can I make a difference and turn this mess into a message.
yeah. You're amazing. I just love your energy. I love that how you've, looked at everything that has transpired in your life and, have turned it to be of service to other people through your foundation, through the work that you do. For you listening, if you're listening right now, obviously we're going to put in the show notes a link to her foundation so you can check it out, hopefully get involved, find ways to contribute, give back, and help Victoria continue to impact and serve other individuals that are going through their own challenges as well. They're on their own journey. But you can also check her out on ESPN. She's on ESPN. She's talking about sports. She's in her comfort zone. She's doing her thing. She brings her bubbly personality. I can't tell you how often I see her. You can also see her on social media. Like we follow each other, but I'm always like seeing everything you're posting. And then I know that last year, and I hope that this is still happening. But I know last year, I remember last year that you announced that you became like one of the co-hosts of American Ninja Warrior Junior. Are you still doing that?
Yes,
So,
and season 3 just premiered this past September. So our week 5 show drops today on Peacock.
oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Victoria, the name of this show is Rebirth. Rebirth to me, obviously, the day that I was injured, I believe parts of me died on that day, other parts of me were reborn. I believe that all of us experience rebirths over the course of our lives, right? Different phases of our lives are die, and other parts of it are born. For you, what would you say? And it may be the most obvious moment in your life for all of us, or it may not. But what would you say was your rebirth in your young life so far?
Oh, that's a really good question. I feel like you, I feel like there were parts of me that were forever locked in, and then there was parts that I discovered about myself. But I feel like honestly, I feel like this last year has been a big rebirth year for me. I think, I I've done, so much, and then everything stopped and we were kind of put in this, weird vortex that I feel like we're all still in. And so for
Mhm.
me it's been a huge year of getting on track with my mental health, which I never did before. I never really gave it the time of day. I really kind of just got on with it. And then when we
Mhm.
were all forced to stop, there was, I got really sick with severe endometriosis and ended up in the hospital and surgeries and procedures. And then, my world went on pause for a very long time. And I find this out later on, but a lot of my success was driven out of, fear of going backwards, fear of, the that PTSD was just this cloud that was lingering over, but I just kind of got on with it, got on with it, got on with it, which so many of
Mhm.
us do. And so
Yeah,
I feel like the rebirth for me is been this whole past year, and I'm still kind of in it where I'm really
I love that.
taking that and focusing on what I'm doing, and but also focusing on me and focusing on what within, where I'm like, yeah, I probably should be focusing more on joy. I probably should be dealing with the trauma that I went through, like, instead of just putting on a facade all the time. Like you and I have talked about, where you just sit there and you're like, oh yeah, everything's great. And people are like, you're so lucky. Like,
Yeah,
we're blessed, but it's come at a price.
yep,
Our the blessings we have, and the places in which we are have come at a price that most people would not be willing to pay.
yep,
And most people, don't truly understand. And so it's for me, it's honoring that, but also, if I got here dealing with all of that, having those clouds over my head, what would it be like when that sunshine really is without any clouds? And so for me, that's been this last year, is really just re kind of re-emerging like a phoenix, in a sense, where I'm like,
yeah.
okay, I broke down, but now I get to break through.
Ah, I love that. I love that. Like, I love that for 2 reasons. One, you talked about, this comes at a price. However, it's important for people to understand that we still continue to pay a price because we're still human beings and everyday things still affect us, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is I love that you focused on the period of COVID, and because it's easy, I think, for the listener to be like, well, of course, JR, it was when she was 11 years old. Of course, JR, it was when she was 15 years old. Of course. And it's like, nope. Nope. See?
Nope.
See, we're all so much more alike than we think. Victoria, I can't
Yeah.
thank you enough for literally fitting me in between 2 different shows that you're doing right now. She literally did, ladies and gentlemen. She finished one segment, then she comes and jumps on with me to give this incredible interview, and then now she's like, "I have a heart out at what was it,
I
12:35, and
wanna
it's
keep
12
talking with you.
34, and so I got 30 seconds to let her go because now she's gonna shove something in her mouth and go work again. I know how it is. So, Victoria, I
I'm
can't
turkey
thank
bacon
you
right
enough
there.
for making the
Thank you.
time to come on the podcast. We've been trying to do it for a very long time. We're here. Everything is about timing in life. You know that better than anybody. And I can't wait for the day that we can actually in person meet, and
Yes.
hopefully it's on the dance floor.
Yes. I'm down for that. Thank you so much for having me. Oh my gosh, what a
All right.
have me back anytime,
Let's
please.
do it.
I could talk
Listen,
for hours.
we
Let's
will
do
I will go to Bristol, Connecticut, and we will sit down and we will do this in person and just rap about other things in life because I know you're big into
it.
sports. We got to unpack sports. We got to unpack so much. So let's do it. A woman being
Yes.
in this journalist space and sports space, there's so much to unpack. So we'll have to do it again.
Alright, let's do it for sure.
All right, love. All right, keep smiling. Have a great day.
Thank you, you as well. Thanks.